Hi everybody, so welcome for another ecology lesson. Today we're going to be focusing on relationships among organisms. In previous lessons we've been talking about population, right? So we've been talking about things at the individual level and how individuals interact with other parts of the ecosystem. We've talked about populations and how to look at population changes. And now we're going to be talking about community ecology, where we're looking at the specific types of interactions between these populations as they're interacting at the community level. So we are now talking about community level interactions. Let's talk about symbiosis. All right, so symbiosis is where we have two or more different kinds of organisms living together, where there is a relationship between those organisms that allows for the benefit of at least one of the organisms. There are three types of symbiosis that we're going to cover in this lesson today. We're going to cover mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. In mutualism, right? Mutual, meaning both. So mutualism is a relationship, and with both benefits, there are benefits for both of the organisms within that relationship. Here we have the example of the clownfish, right? Our clownfish and the sea anemone is an example of mutualism. The clownfish benefit by this relationship in that they are protected from predators because they live around that venomous sea anemone that provides protection and security. At the same time, the clownfish act like bait. The predators that come after or chase the clownfish into the sea anemone are then, the sea anemone then eats them and has them as a meal. So again, both the sea anemone and the clownfish benefit from this relationship, meaning it is a mutualistic example of symbiosis. Commensalism is another type of symbiosis. In commensalism, one organism benefits, but the other organism isn't affected either way. Right? A great example of this is our friend the shark and the remora. So the remoras, they benefit. They get to go for a ride on the sharks. The sharks take them throughout the ocean. They get to eat the little scraps and pieces of food that the shark have left over from their meals. So remora, they get transportation and food out of this deal. The sharks, they don't really get a benefit, and they're not really harmed. Okay, they're indifferent to the remora's presence. So they are there. The sharks, whether the remoras are there or not, would be going about their shark business. The third type of symbiosis we're going to talk about is parasitism. In parasitism, again, one organism benefits, just as is the case with each symbiosis, but the other organism is hurt. When we talk about parasitism, right, one is benefit at the same time the other organism, the host of the parasite is going to be hurt. A great example of this is tapeworms in animals and in humans. A tapeworm, we ingest a tapeworm through contaminated food or by touching a contaminated surface and then ingesting the eggs of the host parasite. And as those parasites settle inside of our intestines, they hook on into our intestines. And as we digest our food, they absorb that digested nutrition. So the parasite, the tapeworm, of course, gets to benefit from this. It gets fed. And at the same time, the host, either the host animal or the human, is deprived of those nutrients that it needs. And so, therefore, it is harmed. So again, the parasite is helped, but the host is hurt in this relationship. Now, when we're talking about community interactions at the community level, of course, we have symbiosis relationships, but then we have some other relationships as well. One of these relationships is a predator-prey relationship, where one organism is hunted and killed by another, and then that organism is eaten for food. So we have our predator, the one that kills, and our prey, the one that is killed and eaten. Again, this is not a symbiotic relationship, right? One survives and one is dying. This is a predatory or predator-prey relationship. Of course, our friend the Canadian lynx and the hare are a great example of this. Another thing to note, if we tie this back to our evolution unit, is that predator-prey relationships are one of the major driving forces of natural selection, right? The hare, the ones that are selected for better survival against the lynx are the ones that are going to pass on their genes. And so, of course, we have natural selection happening among the hares. At the same time, the lynx, those that are able to run a little bit faster or grab a little bit better, are a little bit better with their wide paws of running over the snow, catch more hares, and they're able to pass on their selected traits as well. So predator-prey relationships are a really big driving force of natural selection. Another type of interaction that we have within a population and within species at the community level is competition, right? Organisms competing for space, for shelter, for food, for water, competing for breeding rights. So there are two types of competition that we can look at. Of course, we have our intra meaning within, our intra-specific competition, which happens within and organisms of the same species. So, for example, a bunch of goldfinches all competing for space at the bird feeder. These two male deer competing for the right to reproduce. So intra-specific within the same species. At the same time that intraspecific competition is happening, interspecific competition is happening, where we have competition between two different species that fill the same niche, that fill the same job or role in an ecosystem. If we look at this picture, for example, we have things like the African lion and the hyena that both fill a niche as top predator on the African savanna, and therefore they compete for similar resources. In this case, food resource. Again, competition is another major driving force of natural selection. Now, to get away from those predator-prey relationships, or maybe to be better predators or prey, we can go a little bit further. We can look at something called cryptic coloration. So when we talk about cryptic coloration, we're talking about when an organism's shape or coloring camouflages into our natural environment. Cryptic coloration we can see among prey, for example, are leaf bugs or stick bugs or moths, certain types of moths or insects. On the other end of things, we can also see cryptic coloration among predators, things like praying mantises or lions on the savanna being colored to hide from their prey. On the very opposite ends of things, if you don't want to hide in, then you better stand out. And so we have a postmatic coloration. Postmatic coloration is where organisms warn their predators that they are dangerous. Don't mess with me. I'm a bright color. I'm probably going to be poisonous to you. I am something not to mess with. And of course, our Amazonian tree poison dart frogs are a great example of a postmatic coloration. As we're looking at this community ecology level of things, we identify certain species that are keystone species. A keystone species is a species that if you removed it from an ecosystem, that ecosystem would crumble or change drastically. Keystone species are usually species either at the top of our food chain or our food webs. They're either our apex predators or they're at the very base or the foundation of an ecosystem. They might be a foundational member of a food web or a food ecosystem. That is important to multiple species. Where we are always looking for keystone species and making sure that those are present and well balanced in a population. On the other end, we're always looking for other things that can upset that community ecology, and one of those is an invasive species. Invasive species are species that are not naturally found in ecosystem. They are non-native, and beyond being non-native, they're invasive. They're invasive because they come in and they outcompete the native species in that ecosystem for resources. A great example here in Michigan, of course, we have our zebra mussels, our round gobies, goldfish, also all sorts of water invasive species, plants like garlic mustard as a purple loosestrife are other types of invasive species. Invasive species come in and they take over some native species in the food webs, in their energy pyramids, and the entire ecosystem is thrown off balance due to their presence. All right, everybody. So this is it for community ecology. I hope you've been able to see how different populations interact within the community level and how we can look at those different types of relationships to better understand our ecosystems. Thank you so much.